Now, Masoud, so before we in our previous conversation, you were talking about, you're telling these amazing stories about, because I think there's a misconception that, oh, well, there's just no talent out there. Like you said, there's no talent to be found.
Mm.
The people, they aren't, educated well enough, or they don't have the skill set, they don't have the chops, or they don't want to work. But what you're saying is that that's not true. And you told me this story
Yeah.
of a young lady. I think was she in Nizwa or the interior somewhere, Ibri?
And yeah. In Rostaq, she was in Rostaq. Yeah.
Rastak. And tell me
Yeah.
this story, because this is a fascinating story, and it
Yeah.
goes back to your point of solving problems. And you started off by finding a problem and then working to solve it, and then you found another problem and working to solve it. And so many people out there, they don't have a real grid of how to take their skill set and pair it right and kind of put the right bolt-ons and shape it right so that it fits in with solving someone's problem. And I think in this story, I'd love for you to retell it. It really pictures that, and even how you helped her figure that out and how you mentored her into that position.
Yeah. And so just before I sort of kick that off, you're absolutely right. Honestly, it's a myth that we don't have talent. Honestly, in my opinion, I don't know, maybe it's the hippie part of me that's coming out here, but I really do believe that, talent is evenly distributed. It's opportunity that isn't. That's really what the issue is here. I think pretty much anywhere you go, there's talent. You just need to have the right opportunity platform to unlock it. That's really what it comes down to. And I think Halima's story kind of is a very kind of visceral example of that. So Halima is a very interesting character. She found her way onto my interview roster, particularly when we were at the height of our ramp up. And typically she wouldn't actually be on there because she actually has a networking background, and we were only hiring people with soft eng or comp sci or even computer engineering, but not networking. That said, she was there, and I didn't really have much time to change my schedule around. And I said, you know what, I'm going to honor it. And so, and she came, and we had
good man for
an
honoring
interesting, yeah. And we she sat in the room, and we began the discussion, and she was very well prepared. I'll give her that. And she had all of her documents. And the first thing she said to me says, well, I studied networking and I graduated, I think it was 2015. And from networking, I was kind of the top of my class. And these are some of the courses I took and some of the programs that I've done, and pretty well done, I have to say. So then I asked her, okay, so it's from 2015 till date, kind of like, what have you been up to? And she said, well, I've been unemployed. Really? And she said, yeah, well, I've taken up a lot of these different courses that were available, sponsored by public sector, some of it by the private sector. And she would rattle off all of these different courses that she took. She took a course in, data center architecture, and she would talk to me about how, you need to, you need to think about energy. You need to think about, is it a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 system, and what the implications of that are. So she was clearly paying attention, and she had certificates for completing all of these courses. And then she talked to me about, SharePoint and enterprise content management systems and taxonomies. It was just all of these
she knew her stuff.
that she knew what's up. But they were clearly totally unrelated. It looked like she was just grabbing whatever she could get. And so after she rattled off like 5 or 6 of these courses, I asked her, I said, okay, so off the back of all of these courses, surely you would have gotten employment. What happened? She said, well, no, I went to interview and I couldn't get employment. And in the back of my mind, I was just thinking, well, yeah, you're not really employable with all of those incongruent skills, right? How what I do is somebody who knows a little bit about a lot of things.
Do you feel like that's a typical thing that when people are feeling, especially young people with access to the internet, they're unemployed, they went to college, their degree's not getting them anywhere, they're in a place where they can't find employment for whatever reason, that they just continue to gather more information and more knowledge about a wide variety of subjects, thinking that the miscellaneous box will open a door, rather than going deep into one subject or one area of expertise and coming out with a real working portfolio?
Yeah, I noticed that. I feel like they kind of just playing the law of averages. A lot of people do that. In fact, I think I was probably, misguided, and I probably did that at some point. But then at one point, it kind of clicked to me. It's like, look, fundamentally, the atomic unit of an economy is, being able to do something useful for somebody who's willing to pay for it. That's
Right.
really what this comes down
Right.
to.
Right.
And so, if I'm learning about the wide range of things, can I be useful and competitive compared to other people who could do a similar useful thing? And if the answer is no, then you probably really want to rethink your strategy. And so I think I do believe that, having a broad knowledge, there's nothing wrong with, I think it's an asset actually to have kind of general knowledge that's relatively broad, but you do need to like specialize in a certain area, I think, because otherwise it just becomes really hard to employ you. If I'm, for instance, an employer and I'm looking to hire a front end software engineer, I'm going to take the person who knows HTML very well, CSS3 and
Right.
JavaScript and maybe Angular and React, that's our stack, for instance.
You need to figure out
over the
what are
person.
people going to hire you out for? Just like this pen. People buy, like, I bought this pen for a specific utility, a specific job, and it does its function well. The other one I have is a piece of junk. It doesn't work. But but the same with people, right? It's what am I going to be able to be hired out for? So for this young lady, when she comes in, you look at her, you're like, you are unhirable. You've been, as you told the story before, you've been doing random stuff on Upwork and doing random projects there and making kumas and, just the gamut. How, obviously, if you're telling this story, you hired her. How did you, like,
Yes.
what was some of that decision process to say, you know what, I'm gonna eat some cash on the front end for a payoff on the back end? And how did you go through the process of actually developing her? And then off that, I'd love for you to share more of how can employers, people who are like you, who want to see their country, their society, their nation, their city grow. They want to see, college grads come out and actually become a useful part of society and actually
Yeah.
build the country from the ground up. How can they, what sort of things can they do to take someone who is in some ways unemployable but has a lot of potential, right? Potential is like the worst. They have a lot of potential. What were some of the things that you did to convert that static potential into kinetic energy?
Yeah, I think honestly, I did very little. First of all, I just put it out there. The thing that caught my eye through conversations with her, or there was a steady theme that she was just a hustler. Like, she chewed through. Yes, she was a bit misdirected and misguided a little bit in terms of the sort of where she would direct her energy and her efforts. But every time a task was put in front of her, she would crush it. I saw that, as you rightly said, after that, I asked her what she did and I was trying to understand what she did to sustain herself because I study a lot of the statistics, but it's very interesting to see the people behind the statistics. And so one of the things I had asked her early on was, if you don't mind, that's this personal question,
Right.
like, how are you sustaining yourself over the last 5 years? And she's like, I learned a little bit of, front end languages here and there. And, I'd make these little websites here and there on Upwork and get $50 here, $100 there. And then she'd like changed and said, but I don't do that anymore. And I said, well, why is that? I thought that was a good, way forward. She said, well, my internet is not stable. I said, okay, so now what do you do? And she said, well, I learned to stitch kumbas. And that's like, it shows determination, and particularly kumbas, which is very intricate design. And so what I could see from her is that there's a lot of tenacity. All it needed to do was just guide it in a way that whatever she was learning was cumulative and not, so it's summative, right? Because if you look at kind of what she's done, it's a lot of stuff, but if you add it up, it adds to almost zero from an employer's perspective. And so all I had to do was like figure out, first of all, where her passions lie. So I gave her some structure around course fundamentals that she needed to understand and gave her a taste of various elements within software engineering, both front end, a little bit of back end, a few different languages. And so she could know enough to know what she likes, And then she figured out, okay, I'm a back-end person. And then from there, we had a very structured program with basically the fundamentals that you have to learn, the core areas that you need to learn. And then after that, really the idea is just jump on a project, just get work on a real life project with a real life team, with a real life project manager, with a real life customer, and you're going to go through trial by fire here. um, and honestly, that's my belief. My belief is you just need some guidance on the core skill sets. And those core skill sets, by the way, are not necessarily like learning syntax. They're learning algorithmic thinking skills. They're learning critical thinking skills. They're learning problems solving skills, right? Because it's an ocean. You can't know everything.
Right.
And really what we're training them to do is to build that resilience, to build those core competencies so that whenever they are faced with a novel problem, invariably they will be, that they have a strong foundation to confidently say, I have no idea how to solve this right now, but I know enough to know that give me 48 hours, I'll read the docs, I can come up with a reasonable solution for you.
And so
that's what we're training them to do.
It sounds like even her coming in, you saw her hunger to learn, you saw her grit, her self-startedness, right? She's self-starting, she's
Yes.
by herself, she's learning, she's figuring out these things by herself. And I think that is one thing that the education system really needs to continue to instill, and something that if you're a frequent listener of this show, I talk about all the time. What's the purpose of education? What's the purpose of learning? Well, it's to teach us how to continue to learn, how to have frameworks of knowledge, so that by which we have this way of thinking that we can analyze and problem solve, not to memorize a bunch of facts, not to memorize a bunch of information, but how can we intake an enormous amount of literature and information and worldviews so that we have structures by which we can view the world. And then once we are introduced with a novel problem, we can then figure out how to solve that novel problem. Because it's because of people like you, Masoud, that so millions and millions of people are going to be unemployed within the next 20, 30 years because of automation and everything that you're doing with front and back end development. And I'm grateful that you're doing it. It's kind of tongue in cheek that I'm saying it, but it's coming no matter what. And so with our kids, even with ourselves, no matter where you are in life, I think we have to start asking ourselves hard questions of saying, how am I developing those frameworks, those structures by which to view the world? How am I becoming a hungry learner? And you made a really great point with her. It wasn't just like, here, learn this and you'll be great. It was try a lot of things, figure out what you gravitate towards, what you enjoy most. And then once you figure that out, let's go deep into that vertical. And it's great that you know how that back end needs to interact with the front end.
Yes.
Right. And for those of you who aren't coding, this still, who aren't in tech, this still applies. It's still good to know how these things interact, how our areas of expertise interact with the rest of the world, right? So then you brought her deep into that so that she could actually add value to your company and then to essentially your clients.